Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know many of you, maybe not quite all of you. I'm Eric Kolochik. I'm the director of the Hariri Institute, and we are really excited today to kick off something brand new. So this is the Did You Know You Could series. It's a series designed to provide a venue where people can quickly get exposed to practical topics around research, either enabling or enabled by computing and data science. The idea is that these may be topics that you didn't even realize you wanted to know about, but when you see the flyer, you go, oh, hey, that would be cool, and you come join us, right? It's what we're calling a Meet and Learn series. So it's designed to have a very low barrier to getting a sense of what it is that you could do and meeting other people who would like to do similarly and creating networks. So today is the launch of the new series. Following this, there will be 3 more scheduled for this fall, and then we're working on a schedule for the spring. If you have, I want you to see what we're doing today and some of the next ones this month. If you get a sense of some other topics you'd like to see, you can reach out to Catherine D'Angelo here at the Institute, and you can give her your suggestions. We're happy to field those. The other aspect I want to mention is that this is the series that is led by the Hariri Institute Graduate Student Fellows. So the Graduate Student Fellows program recognizes some outstanding PhD students here at BU who are pursuing computing and data-driven research. It's a very competitive program that we began in 2017 and supported 25 grad students in their research to date. Currently, there are 18 active grad student fellows who are planning the Did You Know You Could series. So one of the things they're doing in the planning is they are hosting it. So today's host is Kexin Zhang. Kexin is a 5th-year student in the Department of Economics at BU here. She was appointed a Hariri Institute Graduate Student Fellow in 2019. Her research interests are in the broad areas of development economics and applied macroeconomics, but particularly with a focus on women's preferences for family planning usage, the economic impact of transportation infrastructure, and long-run impact of education-related policies. And she's going to introduce our speaker, Professor Mahesh Karra, who is in fact her advisor, on which she's working on behavioral bias in women's family planning in general. So Kexin, I'm going to turn it over to you. It's all yours.
Thank you, Eric, for the introduction, and thank you all for attending. So can you hear me clearly? Okay, so before I introduce you to our speaker today, I would first like to take this opportunity to get to know you better. So to understand who is here today, I'm going to ask you all to help me participate in answering 3 questions. So please help me type your answer in the Zoom chat to each of my following questions. So my first question is, what is your field of study? So could you type your answer in the chat window here so that I can have a sense of like your background? Okay, so I see people from neuroscience, machine learning, speech science. So it seems that the audience today came from a very diverse background. So thanks for answering that. And my second question is, so please use the Zoom poll feature and select the option that best describes how familiar you are with Zotero, the platform we are going to introduce today. So you will be able to see the 4 options on your screen. Yeah, so please select the one that best applies to you. Okay, so yeah, so I've seen the results now. So it seems that 90% of the audience have not heard of this platform before. So it suggests that there is some potential demand for the introduction of this platform. So yeah, thank you for answering that question. So my last question is, using the chat feature again, please type your answer to my question that, what do you hope to gain from today's presentation? So we hope to have some idea of your expectation of today's talk, and yeah, so have a sense of that. Would you help me type your, yeah. Yeah, great. So I see an answer about understanding how to cite articles. So Zotero you will find it a very powerful tool for you to cite articles and also organize your research resources and also, yeah, manage your papers. So great. Thank you very much for participating and letting us get to know you. Now I would like to introduce our speaker to you. So today we are very excited to have Professor Mahesh Karra to give us a talk on Zotero. So Mahesh Karra is an assistant professor of global development policy at the Frederick Pardee School of Global Studies at BU. He is also the associate director of the Human Capital Initiative at the Global Development Policy Center. His academic and research interests are broadly in development economics, health economics, quantitative methods, and applied demography. His research utilizes experimental and non-experimental methods to investigate the relationships between population, health, and economic development in low and middle income countries. And he has conducted field work in many countries, including Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. He has also worked for the Population Reference Bureau and the Futures Group International and serves as a consultant to the World Bank, the WHO, and the Population Council. So now let's welcome Professor Mahesh Karra to introduce Zotero to us and share with us his experience with using this platform in his research. So Mahesh, please feel free to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kexin, and thank you to Eric and the Hariri Institute for giving me the opportunity to talk about a topic that I know Kexin and I have had many, many fruitful discussions on, and for anybody who has had me in class, like at some point during my course, I definitely introduce my students to Zotero and to reference management in particular. The reason why, just a little quick background on this, the reason why this came about was because when I was a student myself, I realized that there was such a need for me to learn about how to manage my own references, how to manage my own citations. And it took me so much time and effort to actually format my citations in the ways of different citation styles, like if you're doing MLA versus APA versus if you're sending your article to one journal versus another journal, they have different styles and different ways of managing their references. And it just became incredibly onerous every time I had to approach a paper. The thing that I dreaded the most when writing the paper was doing the references. And so it was not until actually one of my friends who would just happen to be one of the developers of Zotero introduced me to the platform that it really just completely changed my life. And I'm hoping that it'll show, I'm hoping to give you a glimpse of exactly how powerful of a tool it can be to not only facilitate citations. Citations and managing your citations and references are but one feature that the platform can avail yourself to. It works incredibly well as a way to organize your references, organize your literature, collaborate with others in groups as well, particularly because in a lot of the fields that were actually mentioned by Kexin's survey, we tend to work a lot in groups. I mean, we tend to work a lot in teams. And so research is a collaborative process, and Zotero just actually really helps to facilitate that collaborative process as well. So let me give you, I'm just going to share a quick overview on reference management software. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And I'm introducing Zotero primarily, but of course, I'm going to also mention a couple of other reference management systems and softwares that are available. They're all really good. Each of them have different styles of citation, different styles of reference management, but you can kind of pick your poison, and they all work in very similar ways. So I'm hoping to give you some insight into some of these. So the topic for today is reference management, and specifically using Zotero, and some of you guys might also have heard of Mendeley, which is another platform that could be used. And the great thing is that both are compatible with one another. So whichever you pick, you can easily speak to the other. Why use reference managers to begin with? Reference managers make it easier to organize and search and collate and refer to not only citations, but also tagging, highlighting, cross-referencing. It organizes your documents, both physical documents in terms of PDFs, as well as virtual documents in terms of references. It allows you to systematically collate all of your bibliographies together and put them in standard formats. It's essentially a database of all of your, essentially like a virtual database of all of your citations and archives and libraries. You can of course cite with not only and format your papers with in-text citations and references, but you also can format your documents with across a whole series of formats. So I'll show you how this works in Microsoft Word, but of course, for anybody who works in LaTeX or other types of processors like document processors, Zotero is compatible with a whole series of formats, as is Mendeley, and they're compatible with one another across different formats, which is really helps to facilitate management of sources and references across different people in your teams. The thing that I actually like the best also is the group functions, where you're allowed to where it allows you to share references and citations and resources across teams who you may be collaborating with. So I'll hopefully give you an idea of how that works today. Why Zotero? So I'm going to actually go through, and we're not only just going to talk about it, but I'm actually going to show you how it works for me. And you can actually, as we're even talking today in our seminar, you can actually go to zotero.org and download it for free. The best thing about this is that it's open source, it's free, and it is compatible across a whole series of internet service providers, Firefox, Chrome. There are browsers and add-ons and plugins that are make it compatible with those. And you can cite from any type of platform, like OpenOffice, Microsoft Word, LaTeX. And there are, of course, processors and plugins that are freely available for download. And I'll actually show you how you can actually access them in the Zotero website. The best thing is that, that I find about Zotero is my ability to organize PDFs. I don't know about how people have been organizing their PDFs and references, like in the absence of such reference management softwares, but my world used to be where I used to have like a folder on my desktop somewhere, and all my references, like hundreds and hundreds of papers that I would read and that I would download as PDFs, would just be in a stack, right? And anytime that I had to search through them, it was incredibly onerous to do so. What Zotero actually does is that it integrates the reference management with the PDF storage. So even when you're offline, even when you're not on your Google Scholar or on your online databases, you still have access to all of these PDFs, web pages, and images that it takes snapshots of, so that you can access your references like from anywhere. As Kexin mentioned, I often work on pretty field-intensive projects in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, where internet connection and reliability is very weak. So oftentimes, like the place, and actually, as Kexin probably knows, my favorite place to work is often on an airplane. Well, when we were allowed to fly, like it was the best place for me to like actually write and cite and work on papers. And oftentimes internet connectivity on an airplane is non-existent. So what it would allow me to do is that I could actually download all of my Zotero references, organize them before I even got on a plane or before I went into the field. And then while I was there, I could continue to work on my research, which is great. Zotero by default gives you some space to actually store PDFs, store references, store your citations for free. But of course, I'll show you my library. My library has about 8,500 references in there, organized across many, many different projects. And so I've had to just like Dropbox, I have an annual paid subscription that I enlist to, so that I can get more space. Yeah. And the great thing about Zotero is it's literally click and go. And I'll show you how that works. Like, you click on the citation that you want to import, you can import it directly. You can take notes on the citation that you use. And the best thing, as Kexin and I, who work on several papers together, is that we're allowed to group share. So any references that I pick up, I can share with Kexin. Any references that Kexin picks up, she puts it into the group folder in library, and then we essentially have a joint library that we share together, which is great. So it really facilitates collaboration. Best thing about that, syncing across documents and references. So that facilitates any sharing across groups. And it also allows and facilitates version control, which I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes I have so many iterations of a paper, especially in economics, where the publication process in economics takes years, right? I have the working paper of a paper, then I have the preprint article, and then I may have the final published version of the paper 3 years later. And what it allows me to do is that it allows me to collate and actually keep a version sync history of all of these different versions so that I know which version I'm citing from. Best thing about Zotero, and I'll show you how this works, integrated completely with Google Scholar, as well as most university libraries. The BU University Library is actually directly integrated, so you can actually set up proxies so that any citations that you have access to through your BU library, you will also have integrated into Zotero, which is great. So I'm going to stop there with Zotero, and I'm actually going to show you what it looks like now, because before we go into Mendeley. So can everybody see my screen on my, like I'm online right now. I'm on Google Chrome, yeah? And what I would do is that you can actually follow along with me if you haven't got Zotero already. If you go to zotero.org, free, it's a personal research assistant, exactly as it says. You can click on it, free download. And then when you click on the download button, you can download the Windows client, Zotero 5.0 for Windows, which is a desktop program. And what you would also need to download is the connector, the plugin for Chrome or whatever internet browser you use, so that any documents that you actually find, any references or PDFs that you actually find on Google Scholar, JSTOR, any of these other repositories are directly integrated from Zotero, from your Google Chrome into your Zotero library that you can use for citation in your Word documents or in your LaTeX, yeah? I would also, in addition to Zotero Connector and Zotero 5.0 for Windows, there are a whole series of other plugins that actually can really help you, and I'll show you a couple of them that I tend to use. I tend to use Zotfile, which actually helps me organize and actually name all my documents in a way that is systematic, and in a way that the references are all the PDFs are named exactly in the same way, where it's like author, date, and then the title. So I store them uniformly, no matter how they were imported in. So that's actually for me incredibly useful and effective. So I'm assuming that people may be downloading Zotero as we go. So I'm going to show you what it looks like once you've downloaded it. So once you download it, it looks something like this. Can everybody see my Zotero right here? Yeah. So once you've downloaded it, what you will actually end up seeing is there's a big folder called My Library, which every citation or reference that you have comes into this folder called My Library to begin with. So right now, as you can see, I've got 8,668 items in my library. This includes both my my own personal citations, as well as any references that are shared across groups between me and my collaborators for any papers that we write. The way that I tend to obsessively organize my Zotero library, as you can see, it's pretty obsessive given the number of folders that I have, is that I typically organize my Zotero library for every single paper or every single project that I have. I have my own folder for it. And I think that there are some faculty on here or some graduate students who are starting to write papers and send them out for publication. This is actually a strategy that I found to be particularly effective, because oftentimes when you send out a paper or an article or a book for publication, you have to also send all your references and citations along with it in one file, in a compendium, right? And so when the journal or the publisher asks for that file, you can directly export an entire folder rather than having to find every single reference that you had used to cite the paper or the book or the article. You can actually just export everything within that folder into one file that is then eventually used, that can eventually be received by the journal. Best thing also about it is that different journals have different citation styles. So depending on our different ways of exporting references. So depending on the requirements that the journal has, you can export them differently. Yeah, and that makes it super flexible, for your needs. So as you can see, there are many different files. Here are all of my different folders from where I've taken and organized my different files. And what you will also see on the bottom here on the left are group libraries. So group libraries are basically libraries that are created where there are other collaborators. And as you can see, I've got several students who I'm working on theses with. I've got several projects and papers that I'm working on with other people. And I'll show you how group libraries also are functioning. So Kexin and I actually shared this group library called the Behavioral Biases Study, which Kexin and I have been working on in Malawi for the past 2 years. And these are all of the references that we tend to share. Okay, so how do we actually get a reference from Google Scholar or any other repository into Zotero? What we're going to do is that I'm first going to say, in Zotero, in my library, I'm going to pick a place where I want to save it. By default, everything that you import in from Google Scholar gets saved into your library, but you may want to save it in a particular folder so that like whenever you're ready to receive it and whenever you're ready to export it, it's there in that folder for you. So let's assume that I'm going to save it in my BU 2021 folder. I created a folder for any papers that I'm reading currently that are not really related to any particular research project, but just papers that I'm like currently reading that are interesting to me. So I've picked this folder in Zotero to save my citation. How do I go and actually save it? I now go back to Google Scholar or to any repository. Let's just say I'm searching for a paper. And let's find a paper that we'd like to search. Actually, let me actually search for one of Eric's papers. Eric, let's see, yeah, okay. Let's search for one of Eric's papers. Okay, so one paper that Eric has been writing about is statistical analysis of network data with R. Actually, that's a great paper that I actually need to cite because I work on social networks as well. Perfect. So now that I have this paper, it's actually a book. It's actually not a paper, it's a book that he's written. I can actually get access to this book just like you always would with Google Scholar if it's open access. There's a PDF through Semantic Scholar where the book may be available or an excerpt from the book may be available. Oh, this is your presentation. Great. So that's also available. But as we typically go with Google Scholar, you can actually directly go to PDFs if the PDF is available for you. If you're using JSTOR or any other repository and through the BU library, you can actually go either through, I have access to the Harvard library, but you also can have access to the BU library, for example, to references. When you download Zotero for the first time, and when it's all set up, what you're actually going to see on the top right is this little icon here, which is actually, in Google Scholar, it looks like a folder, and it's called Save to Zotero Google Scholar. If everybody can see on the top right, when you click on that icon, a box will come up and say, here are all of. Oh, let me just pull that box back up. There we go. There we go. Here are all of the references that are found in your Google Scholar search that you can import into your Zotero citation. So let me say that I'm importing Eric's book, and I also see that Eric has written a paper in Statistica that I also want to import, empirical likelihood, which is right here. I'm going to click on these two references and I'm going to import them. Once I click on OK, notice Zotero is automatically going to, by default, go and save these citations in my folder that I have selected by default. So I said that I selected my BU 2021 folder, which is where I'm saving things. And notice, if I had access to the full text citation, which I think for one of Eric's papers I have, it's going to automatically bring them in. So now notice both of these have been saved. If I go to my Zotero folder, look, here they are. They're imported right in. When they are imported, notice you will see Statistical Analysis of Network Data with R. It's a book. And on the right side, you will see all the metadata that is specific, that has been imported as metadata from Google Scholar into your Zotero library. And if you notice, you can actually edit any of these that may be incorrect. Because sometimes Google Scholar, like the metadata that is included in Google Scholar may not be correct. It may be incomplete or may be incorrect because Google Scholar is not read in the metadata incorrectly. You can always go in here and correct any of that information. So if Eric's name is incorrect, or if we have like the volume or the addition of the place is incorrect. So Eric, do you remember which, I can see that this is a book and I don't remember what place this is. Do you know where your book was published? Was it in New York or?
Probably New York.
Okay, so I can actually add New York as the site, as the field to say place of publication. It was published in 2014. If the publisher's name was incorrect, I can always edit any of these fields. Yeah. Same thing with an article. You can see that the article icon in Zotero is slightly different, and it's a journal article, and it asks you as many of these fields that may be like applicable for citations. So page numbers, volume, issues, publication, which is a journal name, date, and oftentimes we also have the DOI, the direct object identifier, for different references that you can also put in directly. So we have these two citations that I have newly imported from my Google Scholar, just as an example, into Zotero. Now let's say, how am I going to use it? How am I going to use these new references as citations in my Microsoft Word, in my LaTeX, in whatever platform you decide to use for processing documents? I'll show you how we do this in Microsoft Word. So I've opened up a blank document from Microsoft Word. And once I've opened my blank document, I notice I have this document open and I also have my Zotero library open. So you have to have both the Zotero library open and your document processor open so that anything that is being cited, like Microsoft Word needs Zotero just to be open so that it can import the citations directly in from Zotero. So it knows which citations and references to import. So let me go back to my Microsoft document. Here is my new paper on social networks. I am now writing text and I want to cite Eric's paper here. Okay, so I'm now I've written some text, right? This is my document and now I'm gonna actually cite Eric's paper. How do I do that? Well, once you've installed Zotero, there's a Microsoft Word plugin that is installed that as part of the main installation. And when you actually go up on top to your Microsoft Word, you will see a tab now for Zotero. And when you click on that tab, you will have several options here, just like you would for any other tab in Microsoft Word. You can now add and edit your citation. And the first time that you click on a citation, if you're citing a reference for the first time in this document, it's going to ask you the type or the style of citation that you would like to add. Like, are you adding it in Chicago style, MLA? And notice how there are 1,000,001 different styles. Like there are thousands of different styles, depending on the journal, depending on the article. And if you don't see the style that you like here, you can always click on the Manage Styles button, which is, do you see this blue button here, which is the Manage Styles in that field? If you click on that Manage Styles button, it'll take you to a repository of over 40,000 different types of citation styles for different journals, different books, different publishers that you can download for free. Yeah. So let us, and by the way, once you set a citation style, you can always change the style. It is never set in stone. You can always change the entire format of your citation style just by the click of a button. So let me give you the example. Let's say that we're starting off with the American Statistical Association citation style. Yeah, so I'm going to click on ASA as my style, and I'm going to say OK. And now you can see that the field is open for me to insert a citation, and you will see this red bar. Oh, I just lost the red bar here. Do you see the red bar here, guys? That has popped up. This red bar is searching for the Zotero library. It's now going to say, tell me which book or article or reference you want me to cite here. I'm now going to look for Eric. And I just can type in anything about the paper. I can type in Eric's name. I can type in the title. If I don't remember the title, but I know Eric's name. I can type it and I can look for the different references that have those words and as part of some field. Yeah. So here right now it's taking a while because my library is about 8,000 references. But let me see if I can find it faster. See. Sorry, guys, it's literally just me waiting to see if it can find the reference. Why is that a little frozen? Okay, let's see, statistical. Let's see if we can make it any easier for Zotero. This, by the way, has nothing to do with Zotero. This has everything to do with my computer being ancient and just slow, and my library to be big. Okay, it's taking too long. Let me actually see if I can just undo it. And oh, there it is. Perfect. So notice once I've typed it in, it pulls up any of the references. So it just took a little time. It pulls up any of the references that have those keywords, or even part of the, you don't have to type in the full keyword, even part of those keywords in. It's going to pull up all the matches. It's going to do a fuzzy word search across your entire library. So let's just say that I want to cite Eric's paper from '94. I click on that and notice I have it come up as a blue field. Once I say that's the blue field I want to cite, I press enter and it's now cited. I just have to literally click on enter and it's now in as a citation, as a field in my Word document. Let's just say that I've now finished writing my paper. Want to add bibliography. So now here are my references. I've written my paper. I'm now going to add my references into my paper. All you have to do is just literally click add edit bibliography, and all citations that were cited in the text will automatically be imported in the right format. Done. There's my bibliography. One click and you're done. Let us assume that I not only want to cite Eric's paper here, but let's just say I want to change or modify my citation. Like it's no longer just Eric's paper that I want to cite, but let's just say I have another citation I want to add. So I can now click on edit I not edit the bibliography, edit the citation. So I can click on add edit citation once I have my cursor over the citation I want to edit. Once I click on that, notice that the bar comes up again. It's now saying you cited this before. Let me add another citation. Let me see if I can find Eric's other paper or his book actually. And we have to wait a little bit again because of my search function. Oh, getting faster. Notice I've cited his 94 work, but maybe I want to cite his 2014 work as well. Click enter. It updates the citation and it also updates the bibliography automatically. That took me 3 clicks. Yeah. And it will be faster if my computer was faster, guys, but I'm sure your computers are much faster than mine. And so you will be light years ahead of me when it comes to citation. Yeah. Let's assume that we don't want to cite this work in the American Statistical Association format. Remember, because a lot of times, I mean, part of the game of academia is understanding the pain of rejection from different journals. That happens often. And so oftentimes when that happens is that when you have to reformat your articles for different journals or different publications or publication styles, you have to redo all of your references. Now, imagine if you had spent 3 hours formatting your paper with like 500 references in one format, and now you have to send it to another journal and you have to redo all of them. That is incredibly onerous, and it essentially is incredibly discouraging for you to ever get to that process right away. But let's just say that I sent it to the ASA and then they rejected my paper, and now I want to send it to somewhere else. But for this other journal, they care about citing in Vancouver style. Not in the American Statistical Association style guide, but the Vancouver style. All I have to do, click on document preferences, scroll down to Vancouver, click on Vancouver, click OK, and it changes everything into the Vancouver style just by one click. I literally just have to go to the document preferences and change the citation style, and it does it all in one click. So now this is formatted in the appropriate style. And as I keep adding citations, so okay, add more citations here. I can just keep going, adding more citations. Let me see if I have any work from me, if there's anything here. Yep, I can just click on something here, enter. It just keeps updating as you go. Write more, cite more. Let's see, because I know I have some papers from David. Okay, enter, write more, cite more. It just keeps going. It's just literally a click. Yeah. So that's this is literally how easy Zotero is. And I think that the demonstration hopefully shows you that it is like once you have your library set up and everything set up, it's incredibly easy to cite and write. So if this was all you were using Zotero for, I think you've already probably saved yourself about 4 hours of work per paper. Now, what are some other features that we can use from Zotero? So let's go back here and let's actually take a look. you can cite directly from Google Scholar, but as I mentioned, if you actually were to go to the websites itself, like a lot of times we go to the, oh, I have to log into Harvard. Let's forget that. If we actually go to some of these sites, you actually will get some of these like journal specific access as well. Like a lot of times we have access or subscriptions to certain journals. If you have a subscription to the journal and you actually have access to the PDF, you can download not only the citation, but also the PDF. So notice if I go back to these two citations that I got from Eric, actually let's sort them by the date added. So here were the ones that I got from Eric. Notice here that I actually had, for each of those citations from Google Scholar, there were also PDFs or some sort of other attachment that was imported also. So if I actually were to double click on the PDF, if there was a PDF attachment for the paper, I get the paper with it as well. So this is how you can actually keep your papers and your attachments along with the paper itself, with the citation itself. So notice the citation and your papers, all the references are together. Other things that you can use this for. Going back to Zotero, if I click on Zotero, oftentimes I love to make notes on my papers. So I often, like, you can actually go to Zotero and click on notes, and you can click on add a note, and you can actually literally type in notes like Eric's paper on GLMs, right? Need to use for site when I write papers with nonlinear regression estimation. Right? I mean, like these are notes that I'm like writing to myself to tell me that this is what the paper is about. This is how I can use the paper for other things. It's literally like as if you were highlighting on the article itself, or if you, for a lot of times, if you use like Adobe PDF Reader or Adobe Acrobat to like highlight sections of PDFs to tag and to make notes, you can actually make notes directly in Zotero themselves. And what's helpful to that is because oftentimes if we have a group, so Kexin and I share a library together. When we have references that we want to share and we're saying this is how we need to cite these papers or cite these references, when we write papers together, we can write like notes to one another, literally through the process. Another thing that we can also do is oftentimes I also can add tags. This is just literally like hashtags where you can actually tag your different papers so that if you were to ever search, like anything that is tagged is searchable in the Zotero search function that you can use to say, like, how can I cross-reference across different papers that all have similar tags, that all are likely to be speaking about similar topics that I need to cite. Let me relieve people's concerns and fears. Now that people may think that, oh, Zotero is such a great place and like a functional possible way of managing my references, how do I begin when I have, let's just say, 500 references on my desktop that I need to now import into Zotero? How do I import Zotero reference PDFs easily? A couple ways. One way you can do it is literally, if you were to open up your folder, let's just say you've got a folder here, and here are all your PDFs, you can literally just highlight all your folders and drag them right into Zotero. If you drag them right into Zotero, Zotero will import all of those PDFs and save them in the folders or the folders where you want to save them. And if any of the PDFs have OCR readability capacity, where they have metadata that is associated with the PDF, Zotero will automatically extract the metadata and start putting them in the right fields for you in the citation. So if, for example, if we knew that there was a paper here by Sarah Lowe's, but all I had was just the PDF of Sarah's. I didn't actually have I didn't have it from Google Scholar. I wasn't importing it from Google Scholar. I had the PDF separately. I can read it in, I can import it in directly into Zotero. And if any of these fields were metadata that were part of that PDF, because the newer PDFs and journal articles all have metadata that is embedded as part of the PDF, they will all be read in directly as you import them into Zotero. Yeah, it's super straightforward. Another way you can do this actually is if you actually click on the little plus button here and click on what do you want to add? You can add store copies of files, because if you've got files that you've stored as part of, like on a folder or on a desktop or wherever you have them stored on your computer, you can click on store copy of file, and then the select a file screen will come up, and you can select all the files that you have that are PDFs you want to import. Let's just say that you don't, oh, there's a chat, let me see. Yes, okay. So let's just say that there are citations that you want to add manually. You can always go here and you can always add manual citations. So let's say there was a journal article here that I wanted to add. Notice that this is blank. This is test paper by Mahesh, Journal of Fun Things, Volume 1, Issue 1, Day 2020. I've added this manually. I can always right-click here and attach a new file. Or if I had a PDF of this journal article that I've now created, test paper, I can add it manually. And then when I go into my citations here, let me see that I want to add a citation here. I can always look for test paper. And if I find test paper, it will automatically bring it in. Because I've just added this as a reference, it should add right in. There we go. Test paper, Journal of Fun Things. There we go. Done. Cited and done. So this, I hope that this is an incredibly powerful tool for us to be able to think about how we can organize our references better. Oh, for anybody who uses LaTeX, I'm going to do like one last thing about LaTeX before I open the floor for some questions. One thing that you could, like oftentimes with LaTeX, what we end up using is Bibtex files, where we're trying to produce like a whole series of references as part of what is in LaTeX known as a Bibtex file. If everything was organized in a folder, all you have to do is you can right-click on the folder and you can just export the collection as a Bibtex file. Or you can export the collection as any other type of file that you want, like a bookmark, a CSV file, an EndNote file if you've got colleagues who use EndNote as references, RefWorks files, RIX files. But if you export it as a Bibtex file, it'll actually export the entire folder, all references in that folder as a Bibtex file for citation. And you can just save that in the folder where you have your text files, and then you can use it accordingly. So on that note, I'm going to stop. I didn't have much time to talk about groups and group sharing, but like that's actually a function that is pretty like easily bought in. Like you can actually go to the Zotero help website. They have a very clear user guide on how you can actually set up groups. It's literally like setting up a shared folder where you invite another user who also has a Zotero account to that folder. And then any files that are put into that folder, and once they are synced to both of your libraries accordingly. So I think that's hopefully pretty helpful, and I'm happy to stop here and take any questions about reference management. Zotero, Mendeley works very similarly, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, but they're all very similar platforms that speak to the same question, which is how to manage your references and how to essentially organize your academic bibliographies. So thanks so much, and I'll take some questions and stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Mahesh, for giving such a great and informative talk. So now let's open up our Q&A session to see if there are any questions from the audience. So you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself if you have any questions for Mahesh regarding the use of Zotero or how to manage your resources for research.
Hi, Professor Karra.
Hi.
This is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for giving this talk. I'm wondering if we could use the Zotero within the overleaf, because I know a lot of people use
Absolutely.
that.
Okay. Yep. So overleaf is a LaTeX. It's a LaTeX processor, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes with overleaf, what you have to do is that you have to be able to integrate, like you have to essentially export your files as Bibtex, like Bibtex oriented files, where you're reading your references into tech. That is actually like, it's exactly what I was showing, which is like a right click. If you right click on the folder, let me actually quickly share this with you. If you go back to Zotero, let's just say you've got all of the references that you want is in this folder, right? If you right click on this folder and if you export the collection and you export it as a Bibtex file, it's a tech file. So when you export it and you can actually open the Bibtex file, it'll have all of your references in the appropriate tech code so that you can import them directly into Overleaf without a problem. You can just copy or paste them, or you can actually import a Bibtex file directly into Overleaf so that it can process all the references accordingly. But they work exactly like that, and it's compatible with tech. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions? Please just unmute yourself and ask Professor Mahesh.
So Mahesh, do you have any compare contrast with Mendeley? I know we don't really have time to get deeply into it, but
Yeah.
if someone is using Mendeley, what is it that Zotero offers, or vice versa?
They're incredibly, I mean, they're competitors, but they also collaborate a lot in the way that they've actually go on with reference management. They're really very comparable. Mendeley is also free, which is great. Mendeley has, like, I think some of the group functions in Mendeley are organized slightly differently in the sense that they have like some other organizational structures that are possible. Zotero, from what I've seen, the integration with search engines is slightly better in Zotero because it's like a easier click, if that makes any difference to you. But honestly, like they both of them, I mean, I started using all of these reference management softwares about 10 years ago when there were significant differences between Mendeley and Zotero. Like that's when like Mendeley was exclusively on a separate platform, and Zotero was actually a plugin that was part of Firefox it was all integrated into Firefox. And I like that much better than having to have a separate program to always go to. So that's why I've just like hung around with Zotero. But like, honestly, like both of them they serve very similar functions. They can actually have very similar capacities, and they speak to one another. So if you have if you have a colleague who's working in Mendeley and you want to send citations or references over, our bibliographies over to that colleague, exporting it as an RIS will directly speak to one and the other. Mendeley files and Mendeley bibliographies can be read into Zotero and vice versa. So it makes it incredibly easy. The only thing that is difficult is group sharing. So like the problem, like groups are platform specific. So that's the only quote unquote challenge, but the integration is pretty much the same.
Yeah. And a detail about the LaTeX. So say that I'm writing 2 papers, and one is referencing 15 articles, another one's referencing 10, and they share 5 in common.
Yep.
Then you are exporting from a folder.
Yeah.
But I presume that Zotero is being intelligent in that it stores things somewhere, and that what I'm seeing is just essentially a indexing system. So it's not as if I'm literally keeping copies and everywhere.
It's not duplicating copies at all. So what it does is that every single reference is stored in your library, and the folders are literally just the image to say like these are the references that I have. So like if you actually look at all my folders, I have many articles that are referred into many different, and the same article is in multiple folders. So it's easy to integrate that way. Exactly.
So it's a way of organizing your thoughts around published works, and then they exploit that in the LaTeX download. That's
right. Exactly. So like, and that's why I tend to organize everything by project or by paper, more specifically within projects, so that I know what I'm exporting and how and what I'm referencing across the project. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions?
Actually, can I ask a question about the use of Zotero? Yeah. So I've been wondering about like when you want to cite several papers in one place, then how do you usually do it? Do you like cite them separately and then put each paper in one parenthesis, or cite them all together and put them all in one parenthesis?
You can cite, well, so I mean, typically if you're having, I mean, actually I can go back to the Word document really quickly. So if everybody can see my Word document here, notice here I'm actually citing multiple papers for the same citation. See that? Here it's not like 1 and then 2 where I'm actually citing them as 2 separate entries, because this sentence is actually being referred to from like this sentence, and this is more about how you cite than about Zotero itself. Is like in this sentence, I am citing both of Eric's references, like both of Eric's texts that are speaking to the same like attribution in the sentence, right? So for that reason, I am actually putting them both into the citation entry. Like, and actually, if I were to edit this, like if I, rather than sharing the screen here, I'm just going to share my entire screen. So if I actually like click on add an edit citation here, notice how I'm actually referring to both of Eric's papers in the same citation. So that means that like like in the paper, it's actually going to be together. And if I were to change the document preferences back to ASA, you will see what this looks like. It's actually one, and then the semicolon. The ASA does it with the semicolon, one, and then the other, in that order.
Got it. Okay. So are there any situations where you want to like separately cite them, but in one place after?
So that depends on the journal, really. And if the journal cares about that, then you can actually like split them up. Oftentimes, like what you end up doing is something like this. Like, you know, the evidence. Right. Let me just give an example. The evidence of regression analyses in development can be found in education, and then you cite something here. Health, cite something here, you know, political economy, cite something here, right? So oftentimes within the same sentence, you can cite in multiple different places. And that's something which, like, that's something depending on the journal, like they may want you to do that. Or sometimes the journal would just want you to put all of these citations at the very end. But this is really like a stylistic detail as opposed to like a capacity constraint on Zotero. Zotero can do both, like without a problem. It's just a matter of like how exactly are you thinking about citing in your text.
Got it. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Is there a way to mitigate if you add something to your Zotero and then a year later you find it again, you add it again in a different, so I'm thinking about my thesis and I have many folders within my thesis folder.
Yep.
So if I am citing it in a different folder, and is there a way to mitigate that doubling?
Yeah, so Zotero does some very smart things for you. So if you go, let me actually share my screen again. And I'm going to show you a couple things about how smart Zotero is sometimes. So this happens to me all the time because if I'm downloading like different sometimes I forget the papers that I've like downloaded, and I end up I end up duplicating my papers, and I duplicate my citations. What you can do is that Zotero recognizes any duplicate items in your library. And it can so notice if you scroll down on the left side on your library, notice that there are a couple papers here that I've actually duplicated. Like I've actually downloaded them twice erroneously without me even realizing it. And it can actually tell you, once I downloaded one of these papers on February 14, 2019, and the other paper on October 12, 2020. Yeah. So if you go to the duplicate items, you can click on them and you can see, look, it's the same paper about time, cesarean sections, and neonatal health. You can actually say, do you want to merge those citations together? Like, is it the same paper? Or are they two different papers? And you can keep them as two different papers, or you can keep them as one paper. Here, they're clearly the same paper. And notice that even the citation information is the same. So I'm just going to merge the two items together, and it'll merge it as one citation. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it'll retain any notes you have on one of them?
It'll merge all the notes together.
Thank you.
Yep, and so the same thing here for, yeah, it's exactly the same paper. I downloaded one on the 28th of 2020, but I didn't realize that I downloaded this exact same paper 5 years ago. So I'm just gonna merge that as well. So that's how you can keep your library like clean. And it'll still keep the references in exactly the same folders wherever you are, but with the merged information. Yep.
And what's the retracted items right below it?
So retracted items, oftentimes, like with journals and publications, is that when you have an article, sometimes there's an embargo period on the article where it's not like you can have the citation information, but the journal may have an embargo on the PDF itself, like saying you cannot download the PDF for another 2 years because it's not open access, or because there's some revisions going on, or like even the PDF may have been retracted from the journal, right? Like it's no longer shareable on open access. And there are many different situations where like sometimes like journal articles and publications are restricted for open use. If the PDFs were downloaded, or like if you're talking to the journal sites themselves, oftentimes they will integrate them directly, saying that like, yes, you can keep the. So actually, in my article, like there was a paper on religion, culture, and male involvement. So this paper from the International Nursing Review, it was actually, so it actually tell you dispute concerning rights of ownership of a publication. So there's something going on with the actual ownership of who published this article the first, right? And that's something at the journal level. And what it's doing is saying like, you can no longer download the article itself. You can keep the citation, like all the citation information will be there, but the article itself, you can no longer use, like you can no longer download from this site. You have to get it from other sources.
Okay, thank you. And one more about the merging.
Yeah.
Will it stay in all of the folders I have it in?
Exactly as you had it, yes. So if you had it in multiple different places, and if you had different versions in different places and you merge those different versions, the merged version will replace all those different versions.
And if I make additional notes, it'll
keep them all there. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. It'll keep it all.
Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up. So thank you, Mahesh, for giving such an informative and really interesting presentation. And thank you all for actively participating today. I would also like to thank the Hariri Institute for supporting the logistics of this event and for making this event happen. Our next event in this Did You Know You Could series will be held next Friday on November 13th. So that event will be hosted by another Hariri graduate student fellow, Daphne Ever. During that talk, you will learn about how you could represent languages geometrically as outputs. So that will be a very interesting and exciting talk. And we will also send the details of that event to you later. And we really hope to see you there. And a last word on Zotero. So as was mentioned by Mahesh, to learn more about this platform, please visit the website for Zotero. And you can download it from the website to your laptop, and you can also learn more about all of its functions. In addition, you can also easily find some tutorials for Zotero on YouTube. And I think that's about the end of the talk today. Please feel free to stay if you have any questions for our speaker, or you could email us anytime for more information. Yeah, again, thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to quickly mention is that the presentation has been shared with the Hariri Institute. There are very few slides to actually share, but they're there. And so I think that we may even make them available. I'm happy to make them available as needed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That would be really great.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, and I'm happy to stay on if there are any more questions about this, for sure.
Can everyone unmute to clap?
Oh, thank you.
Let's give it a try.
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
This has come after many months of pain and torture of having to write citations where trying to figure out a semicolon versus a colon, where it's supposed to go and how it's supposed to be. So if I can relieve anybody's pain going forward, I would have done myself a good service. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Yes.